US President-elect Donald Trump has demanded that the hostages who were taken in the Hamas-led attack on Israel be released from Gaza before he gets inaugurated into office in January. He has warned loudly on social media that there will be hell to pay in the Middle East for those who are responsible. Writing on Truth Social and without naming any particular terror group, Trump said, and I quote, "If the hostages are not released prior to 20th of January 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East. And for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity, those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. And in all caps, release the hostages now." Unquote. About 250 hostages were captured in the Hamas-led attack on Israel on the 7th of October 2023. About 100 of them still remain in Gaza, with about a third believed to be dead. The Biden administration has been working over the last year with Israel as well as its international mediators, including Qatar and Egypt, on a ceasefire deal that would include the release of the hostages. But none of that has come to pass. Either Israel or Hamas has held up the ceasefire at different points of time. Earlier last week, when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the ceasefire with Lebanon-based terror group Hezbollah, he was asked, why not a ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza? He responded by saying he was open to a ceasefire provided Hamas releases all the hostages immediately and unconditionally.
נשלים את חיסול החמאס, נשיב את כל חטופינו, נבטיח שעזה לא תהווה עוד איום על ישראל, ונחזיר את תושבי הצפון בבטחה לבתיהם. המלחמה לא תסתיים עד שנשיג את כל יעדיה, ובכלל זה עד שלא נשיב את תושבי הצפון בבטחה הביתה.
Hamas, for its part, says it wants an unconditional and permanent ceasefire, which Israel has been holding off on. Meanwhile, Israel and Hezbollah have been going at each other with cross-border strikes over the last 24 to 48 hours, despite having publicly announced a ceasefire last week. It is still not clear how long this rather tenuous ceasefire will hold, or whether the fighting will resume in full throttle over the next few days. As of now, both America and France, both of whom were negotiators between Israel and Lebanon, are hopeful that better sense will prevail among both the warring parties. It's still not clear yet what tactics Trump might adopt that has already not been taken by Israel or by the United States. And of course, Israel has killed many of Hamas's leaders and thousands of its fighters. Much of Gaza has been left pummeled. Israel has been accused of killing more than 40,000 Palestinians in Gaza, many of them women and children. Trump said in his post on Monday that it's all talk and no action when it comes to the hostages, and his statement suggesting that he could use the power of his office to punish those who took the captives is the first sign of how aggressively Trump might handle his Middle East policy when he returns to office. Trump and Netanyahu share a warm bonhomie, and once in office, he might give Netanyahu the go-ahead to go all out against all the Iranian proxies who've been threatening Israel, which includes Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and perhaps the power center in Tehran itself. But at the same time, Trump may attach some conditions, even a timeline for Netanyahu to get the job done. Netanyahu's wife, Sarah Netanyahu, even visited the Trump home in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, showing the bond between both the leaders and their families. Trump's rhetoric includes threats of military action or even significant reprisals against Hamas, suggesting a more confrontational stand compared to Biden's diplomatic efforts. Trump is perceived as having established personal relationships in the Middle East during his first term, which could facilitate negotiations, which might not have been that effective under Biden. Trump supporters also argue that his reputation as a deal maker, after all, he wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, and shot to fame with that book, that could provide him with unique leverage over both Israel and Hamas. Trump's communication style is also more direct, more confrontational, appealing to a sense of outrage and urgency. This, of course, contrasts with Biden's more measured and empathetic tone. Trump has garnered support from the families of these hostages, who believe that he can exert more pressure on Israel to try and negotiate on behalf of their loved ones and for their immediate and early release. Trump's reputation for being a decisive actor may even resonate with some factions within Israel, particularly those within the ruling coalition government who favor a stronger response against Hamas. Over the last year or so, there's been only one brief pause in the fighting which led to the release of about 105 hostages. And efforts to broker any kind of ceasefire deal appeared to be stalled last month after mediators met in Egypt. Some hostages have also been rescued in Israeli military operations. But there have been protests and widespread frustration in Israel over the lack of a deal to secure the freedom of the hostages. Critics of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have been saying all along that Netanyahu has failed to prioritize the release of these hostages over his own political survival. This is not the first time that Trump has addressed the conflict in Gaza and the fate of the remaining hostages.
We're going to get them back. We're going to get those beautiful kids in some cases, because they're always your children. You know, they'll say, oh, he said children. No, they're always your children. And some older people also, by the way, but we're going to get them back. We got to get them back. We can't let this happen again.
He had told Netanyahu earlier that he wants the war in the Gaza Strip to end before he returns to the White House. And at the Republican National Convention back in July, he said that he wanted the hostages returned and that all the captors will be paying a very big price. Trump's latest warning came after Hamas released a propaganda video showing the American-Israeli hostage Eden Alexander, who's just 20 years old, pleading with Trump to secure his release.
קוראים לי עידן אלכסנדר, ואני אסיר השבי החמאס.
The million-dollar question is, what leverage does Trump have over either party, Hamas or Netanyahu, which Biden did not? Perhaps he just has a bigger megaphone and a bigger stick. And sometimes that makes the difference in tough negotiations like this one.